I think we're fitting in quite nicely.
It'd help if you weren't drinking light beer.
But what's so gothic about vodka and cranberry juice?
Hello, it looks like blood. Did you even read the WikiHow link I sent you on being goth?
Everybody, welcome back to my channel. Normal people, like normies, tend to attribute things that are, I guess, would be common, like things that they would do or relatable things, as things that we wouldn't normally do. I know I've talked about this before, but I remember like friends or family when I was like a teen goth, and I would be at like a family event and I would eat the same food that they did. You know, like what somebody would make like baked ziti or a cake or something, and I would eat that and they'd look at me like, oh my God, you eat that? So there are a lot of these like crazy misconceptions that people apply to alternative subcultures, and for me, goth, that are utterly ridiculous. And I remember, I will never forget this because to me it's absolutely hilarious. I remember myself and an old friend, we were going to be going to a goth night that night, and she wanted to stop over at her brother-in-law's house because he had this huge mastiff, and she wanted me to meet this mastiff because he was so huge and so adorable. And I went to the house, met the dog, and the dog was cute. The brother-in-law was kind of making small talk with us, and he's like, oh, what are you doing tonight? And we said, we're going to a club, like a goth night. Dead serious. He said, so what do you do? Like when you go there, do you put on like a wedding dress and you like spin around? What? But this is genuinely what normies would think about the things that people who are alternative did. They could not apply a normal situation, or why wouldn't we go to a club just like they did, but instead of listening to the types of music that they did, we would listen to our music? Why would it have to be doing something so outlandish as to masquerade as a dying Victorian bride and just spin? It's not to say that I didn't think that was a really good idea. So kind of touching on that in like a previous video, the whole like goth food thing and my family thinking that I was weird for eating normal food, which is still baffling. But it made me really think about alternative subcultures and how we were perceived back in the day, and kind of like, I don't know how it is now, and I'm so curious because I realized, because it really did have me thinking, that the alternative subcultures just in general were far more open-minded when it came to a lot of things. So we were the ones most likely to try things that we never tried before. Now, if you're from the UK, you're going to find this ridiculous, but in the 90s, Indian food was not common in a lot of the states. I know that like your food tends to be, if you're going to go out for like a meal, it tends to be like Chinese or it tends to be Indian. And here, if we go out for a meal, it tends to be Chinese, sushi, or pizza. Those are the things that we go for, but Indian has never been up there as one of them, and now it's only now that it's kind of rising in the ranks as one of those foods that people will go for, which I'm happy because I fucking love Indian food. So, but back in the day, it wasn't very common. So it was kind of alternative subcultures that were the ones that were reaching out and like, oh, let me try that. What's that? That's different. That's interesting. And they were more open-minded to try these different foods, whereas like normies, preppies, and you know, your popular kids are like, ew, what is that? And they would just stick to their bagel and their chicken nuggies and things like that. But meanwhile, we're like, no, give me sushi. What is that? That looks interesting. I don't know what it is. So we were a lot more likely to want to try foods that we'd never heard of before, or cuisines from countries that we'd never tried before, whereas people who are not alternative, they were less likely to want to try that. And I think that really just kind of lends to the fact that we're just more open-minded in general. I don't think it means that we have just a far more expanded palate than everyone else. I think it means it's just more open-minded in general. And I think that's also something that we spoke about, like why a lot of normal people will consider goths. They'll look at goths and they automatically assume that we struggle from mental health issues, that we are depressed, we have anxiety, that we're more likely to unalive ourselves, which is just, it couldn't be further from the truth. And it makes you wonder, okay, well, why do they think that's true? Well, there's, I guess, a couple of reasons. They think alternative in general. Now, goth, you would say that it probably has to do a lot with the macabre.
Come on, CC. Life will get better.
Because it is kind of reflective of death, but it's not. It's an embrace of the macabre. It's embracing sort of dark themes and horror and that kind of thing. but it doesn't really have anything to do with wanting to harm ourselves. So kind of delving into that, it's more along the lines of we are more likely to speak about things. We're more likely to speak about our feelings, and we're less closed-minded when it comes to that stuff. And I don't want, see, the younger generation, and this is what concerns me. What concerns me is that you have a lot of, and I touched on this in my last video, fashion goths. They are no different than the popular kids in school that ridiculed other people for not wearing the more expensive name brand stuff. It's no different. You just add black lipstick and fishnets to the equation, and that's pretty much the difference. So when you have people that are like that, you're going to also have people that are far more shallow, because if this is what they're focused on the aesthetic, they're focused on the outside. Your worth is kind of based on what you're wearing. So, you know, when you have a person who considers himself a goth, but they only consider your worth based upon what you're wearing on the outside, you're talking about a very shallow, judgmental person. And when it comes to alternative and goth people in general, it goes far, far beyond the aesthetic. It goes far beyond. It goes into literature, film, it goes into culture, it goes into music, it just personality, your mindset, your beliefs, your views, your kind of the way that you perceive the world. Just all of those things kind of combined make you who you are. And what worries me is that when you have a lot of the young goths, the newer generation, who are kind of coming into it, and they're falling victim to the whole fashion goths, and which, like I said, are akin to the popular kids in school that bullied everyone else or made them feel ashamed for not having the things that they did or looking the way that they do. I think what they're also doing is they're enforcing that kind of shallow mindset, and they're stopping the individual, like say the baby bat, from exploring anything further. And they view their interests and the things that they really hold true to, the things that they resonate with, they'll look at that as something to be ashamed of, and they'll suppress that part of themselves and then just don a costume that's really not them. So I don't want that to cause a person to not be that creative person, because historically, I think when it comes to the alternative subcultures, we've always been the more open-minded of the bunch. That is not to say that you do not have goths that are such finicky eaters that they will gag at the sight of sushi and you can only get them to eat things like mac and cheese, chicken strips, and that kind of thing. Not to say that, but when it comes to other aspects of their life, you're going to find that they're not cut and dry. They're not cookie cutter. They're going to have a lot more broader interests than, say, your average kind of normie person who are trying to keep up appearances. It's not about wanting to kind of delve into deeper things or try to find your own individuality. It's more about fitting in with everyone else. And that's not what it's about. See, a lot of people think that, you know, when you're new to the subculture as well, that like being part of the subculture has to do with fitting in, like you have to fit in. And it's really not the case. There is a very wide umbrella. And being part of the subculture is very simple. You just listen to the music. And should you decide that you want to be part of the subculture, you actually have the choice. There are a lot of people who listen to the music and they're like, well, I'm not a goth, I just, you know, I like this music. That's option one, but option two, you listen to it, you can be part of that very subculture and choose to partake and take part. There are also people who partake in the subculture, enjoy it, and don't listen to the music because they have friends in the subculture, they like the people, they like the vibe, and that's okay too. But it's important that you know that you don't have to be like everybody else. And that's something so important that you need to hold on to, because those kinds of things, you lose track of yourself and you don't grow. And it's so important that you grow into the person that you're supposed to be, and that you don't shut out the things that you enjoy just because you think they might not be goth or might not be accepted. I got so many comments here from people. I just got one today from a lovely girl who said that she is ripped on to no end because her aesthetic tends to be, she gravitates toward the more romantic side of goth. And because she doesn't look trad, she's been told that she's not goth enough. Goth enough? Like, what is goth enough? To start with, that to me is just an utterly ridiculous statement. So it upsets me to know that you kind of have people policing it in that way. And I know a lot of people think that I'm policing it in the way where I say, oh, you got to listen to the music, and it's not a matter of policing it. It's just kind of stating fact. That's what it is. It's a subculture that was born of the music, and people say, well, why do people dress that way? Well, they dress that way because that's the way the music makes them feel. Why are there so many different styles then within the subculture of like fashion? Because there are different subgenres of music. Some people listen to ethereal and they look, say, romantic, or they'll dress in a very ethereal way, long flowy garbs, that kind of thing. Some people, they tend to favor more Batcave-y, death rocky stuff. So you're going to see them in ripped clothes. And then you're going to have people that maybe listen to more goth rock or dark wave, and you're going to see them in, say, more kind of streamlined clothes, leather, or you're going to see them in more kind of flowy Renaissance style clothing that have begotten old lip service, 60s, that kind of thing. So you're going to find that a lot of these people, yes, they do don these different aesthetics, but it has nothing to do with goth being a visually based subculture. It does play its part, but it's not visually based. The reason that they do is because it's a reflection of the different subgenres of music. I had somebody comment on my last video and say something along the lines of like, oh my God, what are you talking about? Like 90s goth was the most fashion driven. 90s is when goth became its own thing. You know, you had the 80s and goth was born of punk, and it's still very much like held on to its punk roots. You know, you could still hear it in all the music. You listen to things like Ex Mal Deutschland, you listen to Specimen, you hear it in there. Community FK even. You could still hear that, like, that punk spirit. As we got closer into the 90s, that's when things started to like become more goth. That's when goth really became its own animal and started to become its own thing. And a lot of people say, well, that's when the romance was put into it. And if you think about it, like you think about a lot of the bands that came out of the era, and a lot of that can be true. You have things like London After Midnight, you have Mephisto Walls, you have Switchblade Symphony. Well, it's a little bit less romantic and a little bit more dark, but I think it could be a little bit more romantic. But you have Faith in the Muse and things like that, and you do see that romantic vibe. Requiem in White and more Syphilitica, these are more ethereal-ish bands. You know, you have a little bit more aggressively driven, but, you know, speaking of ethereal, that's when things like ethereal became popular within goth in the 90s. Ethereal, dark wave, goth rock, all of these different sort of subgenres began to form. So some of these bands did exist, like the dark wave bands, the ethereal bands, but these subgenres weren't really written and they didn't really become more of a defined sound. And those sounds really became more defined in the 90s. And a person's aesthetic being a direct reflection of the music that they enjoy and the way that that music makes them feel, it makes sense that you'd find more of the fashion evolving and branching out, and you'll have all of these different styles because you have all of these different people that are interpreting the music in different ways and listening to different aspects of the music, listening to different subgenres, connecting to those, and their fashion reflects that. So tapping into yourself in that way is something really important, because a lot of people think, oh, okay, that makes it fashionably driven. You're tapping into yourself. You're tapping into the more creative part of yourself, because the way that you choose to present yourself to the world, the things that you put on your body, the way you want to wear your makeup, that's all a representative of you. That's how you creatively express yourself. So the way that we kind of did it in the 90s, like the way that we were fashionably, we used to we were more subdued. And I know a lot of people probably noticed that, like the 90s garb was a lot more subdued. And when it kind of came to going out, that is when you really shined, because when you go out, you're like, okay, now I'm going to really go for it, because those are the moments that you're really expressing yourself. So when you went out, that is when the war paint went on. That's when the hair got bigger. That's when the clothes got more elaborate, because this is when you really wanted to express yourself, because you're going to congregate with people that are more like yourself. So it's like, okay, I'm going to be amongst my people, amongst my music, so I need to represent myself so they know who I am. Putting extra attention into the hair, the makeup, the clothing, everything becomes a lot more elaborate, not because you want to show people up, because you're like, I'm going to be amongst my people, my music, I need to show them who I am. And that's what it's all about. It's showing people who you are, not, oh, look what I have this and you don't have this. That's what it is now, but I think it's important that we kind of bring it back to where it was, so we can remember where we came from and we don't lose that creative aspect of who we are. Because if you are in this subculture right now, or you're in any alternative subculture, there is so much more you have going on up there and in here that becomes sort of muffled by social media and other people that get in your head and make you feel like those things aren't important. And it's the most important, because you don't want to become buried. The clothes and stuff, that stuff always comes later. You figure out your aesthetic, you figure out who you are, but the most important thing is finding the music, finding yourself. And in finding yourself, you'll find the clothes. It comes. You're not running around naked in these streets anyway. You'll get by until you find like what style suits who you are. And maybe it's like 5, 10, 20 styles that suit who you are, and you just put them all together. That's okay. That is important. But that being said, that just lends itself to the whole goth food thing, meaning like we happen to be a little bit more open-minded than your average person because we're not afraid to express that part of ourselves. And that's not saying like, I don't want to like crap on normie people or people that are outside of subcultures and say, oh, they're so damn boring. But a lot of people who aren't are a little less likely to want to express themselves because they're a little bit more shy, because maybe they are surrounded by people who are more judgy and people who would think that they were weird because their bar for weird is set really low, whereas ours, I don't think we have one, which is a good thing because a lot of us are really out there.
I am so mad right now. My microphone unselected itself and I was using the laptop microphone, which is utterly abysmal, and you're going to notice a difference in audio from that point to this point. But I promise I'm going to make sure to kind of make it as clean as possible because I know how awful that audio sounds and I'm so sorry. But anyway, I digress. So another sort of incident that I remember when it came to kind of like the intolerance of normie people, just being kind of mistreated as an alternative person in general. I went to summer school one year for gym. I managed to fail gym class, but I went to summer school for gym, and I always used to wear like a dog collar, and it was either a cross between a dog collar or a cat collar, and this time it was a cat collar because I remember it had the little metal hook here, and we were walking the track, and I remember this kid and his cousin who went to my high school, but I don't remember them from school, but I'd only just met them in summer school, and we're walking the track, and they would always threaten to bring a leash to school one day, and they were going to, when I least expect it, attach a leash to my collar. I was like, you better fucking not. One day, guess what they did? Did not end well, but they did get away with it because, you know, that kind of thing wasn't frowned upon. It was more along the lines of like school officials were like, okay, well, what did you expect? You're wearing a dog collar. So this was the kind of thing that we expected in the 90s and, you know, even the early 2000s, because that kind of thing was really frowned upon, and they blamed us for any issues that would happen to us. So in their eyes, because we dressed alternatively, or because, you know, we dressed goth and we chose to look that way, we were instigating with everyone else. So we were asking for that level of attention. We were asking for abuse. So anytime something had happened to us, it happened to us because of our own doing, because we invited that kind of thing. So we've come a long way, like a long way when it comes to that kind of thing. We're not there yet, but we've come quite far. But given the bullshit that some of the you know, the older generations, you have like Gen X and the millennials that have gone through, we didn't go through all that so that the baby bats can get pushed out of their own subculture by the very people that bullied us in the first place and ridiculed and mocked us just because they decided that, you know, goth fashion is trendy. Ain't gonna happen. So it's so important that we speak out about these kinds of things and really talk about it and let baby bats know that just because they have their own personal ideas and they have all these different hobbies that may not relate to goth, just because they don't look trad, that's not a deciding, that doesn't decide whether or not you're within or outside of the subculture. That's bullshit. That's not true. So it's really important that we let them know. Firstly, be yourself, be you. Do not stop being you. Do not be a hive mind. Do not be like them. Secondly, you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay, because you're still learning. You're new. And if you make mistakes, big deal. Anyone who tries to ridicule you in such a way as to like make you feel criticized and make you feel this small for making a mistake, it's not a true person. It's not a genuine person. But anybody that corrects you, you have to make sure that you distinguish the difference, because if somebody's just kind of casually correcting you, a lot of times that can make you feel like crap, because nobody likes being wrong. It's embarrassing, but it's really important to learn to distinguish the difference, because just because you have somebody out here that's correcting you doesn't necessarily mean that they're gatekeeping you. It's like they want you to know the right information. It's like, no, you're new, we get it. We want you to have the right info. So here you go. Versus, ew, what a poser. Big difference. So we would never call you a poser for getting it wrong. We'd just correct you. So make sure that you distinguish the difference, because you have a lot of these people like the fashion goths and the TikTok goths that are out there that are actively taking anybody that tries to kind of in good faith correct them, and they immediately, like, they're out with a gatekeeper, elitist, and all of those, you know, victim words. But the baby bats, the genuine ones, see that and learn from it. And why do they learn from it? Because this person is wearing a trad uniform and they don't know the fucking difference yet. So it's so important that we impart this wisdom and say, please be yourself. Please make mistakes. Learn the difference between the people that are here for the long haul and the people that are here because they are just an extension of the popular kids in school in Killstar clothes. It's the only difference. I hope you've enjoyed this video. As always, please engage in the comments because that helps this video reach other baby bats that might be kind of following the same crappy path and not finding the thing that they are meant to find. So help them along. If you see them in the comments, be nice. Just give them the info that they need and help them along because we all make mistakes. We all start somewhere. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.